TommyInnit's 1-year anniversary of joining the Dream SMP happened at the start of July, and that got me thinking. Dream has said before that asking Tommy to join the SMP was one of the biggest risks he has ever taken, a risk he knew of while inviting him to the SMP.
The Dream SMP, originally, I just wanted to play survival with me and my friends until eventually TommyInnit, he ended up asking if he could join. Originally I said no, I was like, nah, because he was such a big troll.
You didn't know if you wanted him on there.
I didn't, I was like, no, I don't really want him on here. He's kind of a troll. Maybe that'd be a good thing. He joins and he's trolling, that adds kind of like a different aspect.
Bear in mind, when Tommy was added to the SMP, he was nowhere near as popular as he is now, only pulling around 1,000 to 2,000 concurrent viewers a stream and at around 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, both of which he's beaten by quite literally 100 times since then. So that begs the question in my eyes, what if TommyInnit never joined the Dream SMP? Alright, so we're assuming that only Tommy doesn't join, so people like Wilbur will still be assumed to have joined, and even members like Tubbo and Jack Manifold, who were directly vouched for and basically added by Tommy, will still be considered present. Also, this video has two parts which you can watch at your own liking. One part where I talk about the actual SMP, so like things like viewers, collabs, other creators, Minecraft YouTube as a whole, and another for all you lore enjoyers out there who want to know what would have happened if Dream had never had anyone to fight with over discs, if Lemanberg didn't have one of its most important members. Alright, so let's talk about the lore impact first, shall we? Tommy is widely regarded as the hero of the SMP storyline, the protagonist, and therefore him never joining would mean a lot for the server's plotline. Since the Dream SMP storyline couldn't function without people like Wilbur to drive it in the first place, for the sake of the scenario, we're going to imagine that the people who joined because of Tommy were invited anyway, because Wilbur was one of those people, and obviously I don't have any lore if Wilbur never started doing the lore in the first place. No Tommy means that no disc war actually happened, beyond a scuffle between Dream and Sapnap. The Dream SMP lives in relative peace at first, with the Dream team, Tubbo and Fundy being the most active players. When Wilbur joins, he attempts to kickstart a monopoly to try and gain power on a server filled with players like Tubbo, who in the absence of Tommy would have been working himself to the bone and be much richer than Wilbur could ever hope to be, while keeping his eyes on some of the server members whom he could rally to his cause. He manages to get Fundy, his son, on his side, while Tubbo and Sapnap try to stop the drug operation that he sets up. This time, however, when Tubbo and Sapnap both propose to join the Empire, Wilbur doesn't turn Sapnap away. He needs to get more people in his ranks after all, and he does still want to stick it to Dream. Getting his friend on the Revolution side seems like a pretty good opportunity. It's important to remember that even in canon, Sapnap and Dream were basically enemies at this point, so having them on opposing sides here makes relative sense, especially with the idea of Sapnap not being a pet killer in the storyline, with Sapnap's character not being completely consumed by this singular, one-dimensional character trait. Without Tommy to completely polarize Sapnap and make him go back to Dream, Sapnap would be ambiguous, meaning that Wilbur would see him as a good insider on Dream's side, but also it would make sense for Sapnap to quote-unquote betray Dream and join Lemanberg. Dream comes into Lemanberg as the walls are being built to ask about them, at which point he's confronted by Wilbur, Fundy, Tubbo and Sapnap. At this point in time, there is not much loyalty between Dream and Sapnap, but he appears irritated by the betrayal of all three people who he considered to be his friends now revolting against him. Since Sapnap is on the other side, Dream hires Erit, Puns and George into the army. With no election to sleep through in this timeline, George isn't ever memed on for sleeping through anything, and therefore is integrated into the story a lot quicker than he is in the actual canon timeline. Tubbo, meanwhile, doesn't have much to bounce off of. Wilbur still has a stubborn and passionate right-hand man who follows him to war in Sapnap, rather for chaos itself than for the ideals, but Tubbo doesn't have Tommy. He ponders on several occasions whether their cause is right, and without Tommy to reaffirm his belief, he tries to get Sapnap to question it, to question betraying his friends. But he's devoted to Lemanberg. In the war that then ensues, Lemanberg tries to make up for numbers with Sapnap's PvP prowess, but in the end ends up losing when Tubbo betrays them to Dream for what he thinks is best for the server. Remember, Dream recruited Erit in this timeline, so Erit was never going to be able to betray Lemanberg. Sapnap requests a fair fight with Dream, but is denied, with no duel, no discs, and no real leverage over Dream for that final showdown that actually happened in canon that looks so good in Sadist's first animatic. Lemanberg is allowed to exist, but it isn't granted any independence from the greater SMP. At this point, Dream and George are left alone on one side of the war, leading to them developing a bigger bond with each other than their connection with Sapnap. This lack of bonding between Sap and George also means that a Kanoko kingdom will never be formed. Sapnap at this point fully believes Dream to be a tyrant for striking down L'Manberg and denying him his fair duel. Tubbo is supported even after the betrayal, however he doesn't end up having anyone to bounce off of or connect with, and isn't allowed within the premises of L'Manberg, much like Eret was in canon. He doesn't feel much loyalty towards the greater Dream SMP either, besides it being his original home, and he finds himself alone. Thanks to the lack of a disc war, there are no attachments that could be used against Dream to get independence at first. However, due to the lack of early game pet killings on the SMP, pets become widely popular on the server. Fundy shares foxes with Sapnap, Wilbur has multiple dogs, and Tubbo has a bee farm. Even Dream has his own stable of horses, just like Spirit, at this point in time. Again, since Dream doesn't understand leverage because of no disc war, Wilbur is the one who takes advantage of this fact, the fact that Dream has all these horses and cares about them, and advises Sapnap to kidnap Dream's horses in order to try and more underhandedly get his country independence. Tubbo accidentally ends up finding Sapnap hiding all these horses inside a hole, and finding this action unprovoked with nothing left to lose, openly joins Dream's team as the situation between the two camps proceeds to get increasingly tense. In order to counter Tubbo's grinding capabilities and unrestrained passion for a cause that he now believes in firmly, Wilbur finally calls Schlatt onto the SMP. With no Tommy, Schlatt only joins now, compared to when he joined previously in canon, meaning there's no Schlatt becoming the Emperor arc because there was no election. The sly businessman takes advantage of the situation between the still not independent L'Manberg and the rest of Dream SMP, and does pretty similar to what he does in canon, and almost betrays the people who called him for help and the rest of the Dream SMP by fanning the flames of tension and profiting off of both by selling things and generally causing conflict. The Dream SMP is stuck in checkmate with what is essentially a part of itself. Tubbo is loyal to Dream, the Dream team is split up, Wilbur having the full loyalty of the rebels, and more people joined to get dragged to either side. And that's what I think would happen with the lore. Okay, so that aside, what would happen to the SMP in actuality? To the SMP as an actual phenomenon, IRL, in the real world? Well, for this case, we're going to be considering a slightly different case than before. Tommy doesn't join the SMP, right? But because of that, neither does Tubbo, neither does Jack Manifold. But here's a real kicker, neither does Wilbur. That's the biggest impact that Tommy had on the SMP, because even though Tommy's comedy was what blew him up, Wilbur's idea of introducing lore, of scripting and crafting this narrative that made people as invested in the server as they are now, that idea was what made the SMP do as insanely well as it did. And I know this isn't an idea that Wilbur came up with on his own, but it's an adapted version and the newest version in the current Minecraft space, so that's why I'm calling it Wilbur's. Without Tommy, without Wilbur, without Tubbo, the SMP wouldn't have moved out of the hardcore Dream stan or fan base as it had been earlier, because the Dream team were treating this just like every other run-of-the-mill SMP. Sure, there were conflicts, but every SMP had those. The only real reason it was even doing mildly well back then, before Wilbur, before Tommy, was because it was, well, the Dream team. There was nothing about the SMP that inherently set it apart, and the ramifications of that, well, they're colossal. Let's start with the easier ones as of now. Tubbo and Jack Manifold both would have likely remained relatively small content creators, both mainly on Twitch and pulling about 50 to 100 viewers and remaining at around 5k, and I think Jack was at 1k subs at the time. This has a fair few rippling effects, the most devastating of which is that the Jack Manifold Whopper meme is gone.
Did you get a Whopper?
Truly a saddening moment for the entire community. Comment F to pay respects, dude. Oh my god. Anyway, apart from Tubbo and Jack, the SMP was also, as I like to call it, a melting pot. A place for large creators of all shapes and sizes from across the community to finally interact, to meet and mingle and collaborate, a place for the community as a whole to grow off of viewers mingling with each other. As a community, we're accustomed to it now, but back before the SMP, if you ask any person who was a fan of Minecraft before the SMP, they'll tell you, collaborations between people like Technoblade and Wilbur, or even Techno and Phil, were few and far between. Collaborations as a whole were basically unheard of, apart from channels channels which only grew off of that, like Dreams. The SMP smushed all of these creators who had never even been thought of as a duo before together, case in point Fundy and Nikki, and thereby created dynamics, fandoms, fans, and even an entire series like Tommy's Origins SMP that just wouldn't exist. Fundy, especially, was completely separate from this entire crowd, but was added to the Dream SMP and integrated into the modern Minecraft community, where his normal content wouldn't have done that otherwise. This also means that one of the biggest impacts of Tommy's blow up, the diversification of the Minecraft space in the eyes of the mainstream, would be completely gone. The idea of being in the Minecraft space nowadays is downright laughed at by most of the mainstream media, especially commentary channels, and Tommy helped to combat that by showing that Dream wasn't the only person who could pull crazy views in the space, as well as showing a much more mainstream friendly type of content, which is of course comedy that's just edgy enough to be considered funny widely. And by making sure that the only thing Minecraft was known for, apart from Manhunt, wasn't the quote-unquote toxic stan base. This was helped in no small part thanks to Tommy's connections to Schlatt, who is, well, we all know Schlatt and Twitter's relationship, let's leave it at that. I also think that this whole connection thing would have another impact, which is that Quackity would never have joined the SMP. This means that the highly produced lore that he and Carl were making, and still are making, would never exist. It means that all those viewers from his channel that followed him for his content and followed him to the SMP because Tommy facilitated his making that kind of content on the server with bits like the cartel bit and the weird yellow neck thing, all of those viewers would be gone. And finally, this is a big one. I wager that if the Dream SMP hadn't blown up as much as it did because of the previously mentioned factors, then Ranboo wouldn't have gotten even close to where he is now in terms of popularity. Now, there is a point here, apart from the fact that being on the SMP and providing his fresh take on lore catapulted Ranboo to even more success. No, the SMP fandom as a whole is what I'm talking about here. That point still stands, don't get me wrong, but you see, without the SMP fandom to bring this incredibly large and diverse audience together that are still united by a few common threads, without that subsection of the Minecraft community on TikTok being so strongly linked together by their one common interest, the Dream SMP, Ranboo wouldn't have blown up as fast as he did on that platform. This is just my opinion again. I barely understand TikTok as well as I do YouTube and Twitch because I've posted like 5 videos there and only 2 of them did well and got over 100k views, but that's besides the point. My theory here is that because the Dream SMP concentrated that audience, because it connected them in the almighty algorithms by that one shared interest, that one shared streamer they watched on Twitch, that one shared YouTube channel they watched, that one shared TikTok that they all liked because it had the Dream SMP involved in it, that they had, which they only had because of a shared commonality in behavior or content preference. Only because of that could Ranboo leverage TikTok as monumentally as he did and as quickly and efficiently and seemingly easily as he did. So no B-duo content for you all you stands there. The best chairs spinning video on the internet would be gone. Truly heartbreaking. Anyway, that's the end of this video, and if you enjoyed it, consider one of these videos next. Subscribe!